Hello and welcome to Different Perspectives. I'm Paul Ndiho. We continue with our AI series, and today we are looking at one of the hottest topics on the continent. Should AI or artificial intelligence be regulated? As AI continues to reshape our economies and societies worldwide, African governments are grappling with how to respond. Some are moving quickly to control the new technologies, while others argue that rushing into regulation could stifle innovation. To help us unpack this, I spoke with Benga Sishaw, the Executive Director of Paradigm Initiative in Lagos, Nigeria, about the risks, opportunities, and what smart regulation should look like. Benga, thank you so much for joining me right here on a different perspectives.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
You are one of the experts when it comes to technology in Africa, in Nigeria. You are one of the major players. You've been in this space for a long time. There's been a lot of talk regarding regulating big tech, regulating AI, the different tools that are out there. People are skeptical about it. Let's get your thoughts on what you think about whether or not big tech should be regulated.
Thank you, Paul. So, regulation has always been a tool to create standards so that society can benefit from any new thing or something that has existed. And new tech is, emerging technologies, big tech cannot escape, the conversations. But there are a few challenges that we've had. First is the fact that regulation will always lag, when it comes to innovation and regulation. And like experts have said, that the gap is what we need to manage. You can never regulate something before it starts. If you regulate something before it starts, then you kill it. You have to allow it to grow. And then when it grows, then you begin to talk about regulation. So that's I think, one of the important things that we need to understand. Unfortunately, in the many African countries where Paradigm Initiative works, we realize that many governments are, thinking of regulation because they are afraid. Now, late out of fear, it is very likely that you will focus on control. You ban this, you ban crypto, you ban this, you ban everything, instead of doing what regulation really is, which is creating standards. Now, if we're talking about regulation, that understands its place, as yes, regulation will lag behind innovation, and regulation is about creating standards, then absolutely. Even big tech itself admits the fact that some form of regulation is required, especially when you have a novel area where everyone needs to agree on certain standards. A very example is all of the conversation around artificial intelligence. Of course, we need standards. We need ethical standards. We need standards that enhance trust. We need standards that make sure that it is not profit over people. It is profit, but with people in mind. Paul, I think it's important to understand these things, especially the fact that if we are afraid of big tech and then we now want to start controlling it, then we will be chasing shadows, because unfortunately many times we can't even control many of these things. And at other times you will just create a black market, and unfortunately can't control that genie when it's out the bottle.
You bring up a very good point, especially when it comes to some of these politicians regulating stuff, shutting down stuff. For the case of Nigeria, where you are, you had issues when maybe about 2 years ago, when the government decided to ban crypto, and they brought in their own cryptocurrency. But people figured out a way to walk around it, and they were able to continue using some of that crypto. So would it be fair to say that some of these regulators maybe also need to learn about this technology before they come and maybe try to regulate it?
Absolutely. And this is, you raise a very important, point. The people who are deploying emerging technologies, they themselves are also still learning. So you can't just come in and say you want to ban this and ban that. You have to understand it. I think that one of the most important things that regulators, governments must understand is that when something new comes, you have to ask yourself four questions. Number one is, what is this? And you're not asking what is this because you're afraid of it. You're asking what it is because you then want to ask a next question. The next question is, how do we benefit from this as a people? How does the national economy benefit from this? How does the socio-cultural space benefit from this? How do jobs benefit from this? When you ask that question, then the third question is, how do we create standards that everyone can conform to, that everyone can benefit from? Not how do we control it, how do we create standards? And the fourth question, which is critical, is if something goes wrong, how do people seek redress? When we ask these four questions, we have a better policy environment.
Here in the United States, for example, we had lawmakers bring in big tech. They wanted to know what they can do or to work around to come up with legislation that can sort of put guardrails in place to make sure that when people are online, especially on social media, they are not harmed. How can African governments, especially the like where you are in Nigeria or any other African country, come up with that kind of legislation where they are trying to protect citizens from being harmed on the internet?
Yes. I think the first stage process that I mentioned is always a good process for governments to involve themselves with. And the first is to seek understanding. When something is novel, the first thing you want to do is to ask, what is this? And when you're asking, what is this? What you're doing is you're listening to the innovators. You're asking them questions. You're humbling yourself, literally, stepping down. And this is where, even the academia needs to play a role, because the academia is where we normally go to get knowledge. But in this case, this thing is new, and the academia needs to be humble enough to do research, to ask questions, and to understand this, where students may even be the ones to teach lecturers about it when it starts. So seeking to understand, first of all, is important. And I think that many African governments make a mistake in this. I'll give a very simple example. The Nigerian government was going to ban Skype many years ago because of voice over IP was a problem, because it wasn't exactly understood. But now, if we had banned voice over IP in Nigeria, imagine how much backwardness we will have right now. But the good thing is that the telecom regulator, the Nigerian Communications Commission at the time, sought to understand first. And that is really important. And the second stage is to begin, it's natural to be curious. How does this help us? People will say things like, oh, data is the new oil. AI is the new cash cow. It's okay to say that. It is not okay to build policies around that. Because if you build policies as if data is a new oil, you will make oil mistakes you made with data, and that will be a problem. But you need to then ask yourselves, what do we benefit from this? And it's okay to ask questions from private sector. Okay, from the technical community, how do we benefit from this? And then when African governments have been able to answer that question, how does it help us in healthcare? How does AI help us in agriculture? How does it help us in education? When we've answered that question is when we can then go to the third stage of policy formulation. People talk about white papers first of all, and there's a reason for that, because if you don't understand it, you can't measure it. If you don't measure it, you can't grow it. If you can't grow it, you will kill it. So this is where policy formulation comes in, where you begin to create standards and not seek to control it. And of course, there are times when you're worried that something could go wrong, because bad actors will take advantage of anything. I mean, to be honest, we know for a fact that water is used to cook, water is used to bathe, water is used, you drink water, and that's important. But there are people who could throw you inside the body of water where they know you can't swim. So there will be bad actors, and this is where you then now create laws to protect people. This is where, for example, you have things like data protection laws, so that if someone manipulates or misuses data, then people whose data is, gets abused can then seek redress. So I think these four stages of, first of all, seeking to understand. Secondly, asking questions of how do we benefit. Thirdly, then building policy around standards and not control. And fourthly, making sure that if anything goes wrong, people can seek redress. This is the four-step process that African governments can maximize in their relationship with new technologies.
Recently, I was listening to one of the things you said. You talked about how some governments use this regulation as a form of collective punishment. For example, they block the internet, or they try to make sure that, or they block WhatsApp, things that people use to communicate during an election, or things that are easily people are easy to communicate using those tools. So, from your vantage point, what do you think that what is required, let's say, to have proper legislation instead of legislating based on fear that some opposition party is going to use this technology to advance their cause?
I think the first thing is to understand that if you legislate from a place of fear, if you legislate from a place of control, you are setting yourself up for trouble. And what do I mean by that? Whatever standards you create now to punish other people, whenever you go into opposition, because you will lose elections at some point. This is Africa. You will lose elections. The elite will gang up with another political party at some point, and you will lose elections. And when you do, those control tools, those surveillance equipment that you bought and invested in will be used against you. I tell government officials, this is the first law of reciprocity. Whatever you create as a weapon will be used against you eventually. So understanding this will help governments understand that you must create you must create standards that are favorable yet effective. And legislative processes are elongated for a reason. There's a reason why there's, first of all, in many cases, research. Many times we don't do that, but we have to do research. There's a reason why there's a first reading where the short title is presented. There's a reason why there's a second reading, so that if you made a mistake in the first reading, you can correct it before the second reading. There's a reason why after the second reading, typically you have a public hearing, so that experts and stakeholders come around and ask questions. And if there is a problem, you're able to fix it before you then go to a third reading and passage of the bill. And if you have a bicameral legislature, you have a chance of correcting whatever errors you made in the first, maybe in the House of Representatives, you can correct that in the Senate. What we must do is make sure that this legislative process is as open as possible. It's in its openness to other stakeholders that we're able to attract the relevant information that is required. Pilot initiative works across 27 African countries, and we find it extremely funny at times where people are trying to make cybercrime laws using cyber security language. Of course, first of all, you know the difference in cybercrime and cyber security. They're naming something cyber security and giving it cybercrime details. So you can tell that from the beginning there's a problem. But if they opened that up, then people will be able to tell them that, well, there's a difference between these two. There's a relationship, but there is a way that we need to graduate in terms of the way we're communicating about it and what we're trying to address. So I think the biggest tool that African governments and especially the parliaments must take advantage of is openness. Openness will breed trust, but apart from that, it will help us ensure that the mistakes we're making in this legislative process are corrected before we go too far. You gave the example of Nigeria earlier. The same country that banned crypto is now talking about creating its own cryptocurrency coin. Of course, it's good when you have policy somersault after someone has learned, but it's terrible for you to, have a recursive policy making process. You make one step forward and then two steps backward, and then one step forward and 10 steps backward. But how to avoid that is openness and the humility to understand that some stakeholders understand these issues more than you, especially young people and the technical community.
So, if I hear you correctly, young people have to be part and parcel of this process. But in most cases, young people are
Oh, wow.
nowhere to be seen, right? Now, speaking about young people,
True.
how are young people using these tools? How are young people tapping into this technology? And can these regulators, who in most cases don't even interact with technology, really regulate something where they are inept at it?
Well, obviously, if you don't understand something, you will mess it up when you're trying to regulate it. But coming to your question of what young people are doing with it, the first thing that young people do with technology is that they use it to navigate areas where things are lacking. A perfect example: M-Pesa was to solve a financial gaps problem. It's the same thing with crypto. There is too much regulation in the financial services sector. There is too much, stifling of opportunities. And so people are then able to use that to navigate. And by the way, when young people are navigating, all those gaps using technologies, because it is novel, of course, some of them will do scary things. You will see someone telling you they want to create a process where you can transfer money by closing your eyes, opening your eyes, and thinking about money and transferring it. It is scary. It sounds scary, but you need to then ask the question: what is this? What is the use case? How do we create standards? A lot of young people are creating businesses, solving the unemployment problem of Africa by using new technologies. They're creating startups, attracting investment, creating new companies that are helping solve age-long problems that African governments were not able to solve, and at the same time solving unemployment problems, at the same time bringing revenue, to the government. So this is the way young people are using this. So it's high time that governments became humble. They sit down, listen to the young people, hear what they're saying, understand the processes of what they are doing, and use that process to feed into your policy making process, so that what you do is you use regulation to support innovation instead of using regulation to stifle or kill innovation.
You have been in this space. You have been crisscrossing the world talking about these new technologies, AI, and all sorts of technologies out there. From where you stand, do you think AI has the potential, or these new technologies have the potential to change the way things are done in Africa?
Absolutely. I know there are fears that people have, mostly because of science fiction, mostly because of movies, fiction, mostly because of movies they watch that has told them that, oh, AI will overtake the world and things like that. There is a legitimate fear that, oh, AI will take over jobs and things like that. And I say to people, it is true that AI will end some jobs. Don't forget, when computing started, people who were typists and could type 80 words per minute lost their jobs. But for those of them who were able to transition, they became not typists with typewriter by hitting it ASDF semicolon LKJ, but by typing on computers and being able to process faster. The net gain is the principle that will work here. Some jobs will be lost, but a lot more jobs will be created. And it means governments now need to work with their people to make sure that those who are likely to lose their jobs are trained and are skilled up so they can take advantage of the game. There are tremendous ways that new technologies will help us. Africa is a very, very agricultural continent. Precision agriculture is the future. You can't plant maze and everything now with the former assumptions that, oh, we have only one cycle of harvest. No, we don't have that option anymore. You have to find out when is the best time, taking soil samples, taking big data over a long period of time in a location. You can then be able to say, listen, the nutrient in this area has shifted. You can't plant this particular there. You can plant another one. There's precision agriculture, a lot of application of new technologies. Remote villages where there are no doctors, where there are no equipment, but where the medical professionals will be able to get on a Skype call like this, on a Zoom call, or any kind of call, and be able to listen to professionals and carry out complex operations. And eventually, where you will have digital devices, Internet of Things, where you will have devices that are connected to the internet and can help medical professionals and others navigate this. You will have classrooms that are led by facilitators who only need to know how to teach, pedagogy and things like that, but will then be able to get content and more information because they're connected to the internet. I mean, this is a brilliant and bright future. And like I said, people are afraid, which is understandable, but we must learn, embrace, and I can imagine the first time that the men who were used to stones in the Stone Age, when they saw anything that looked different from a stone, they were worried. When they saw metal, but eventually you have to move from building a stone to understanding the metal, to forging the metal, to using the metal, and to using it to create a better life for yourself. That's what we must do with new technologies.
I think I could not agree more with that. Thank you so much for your time.
All right.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much again for your time.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul.
Benga Sesho is the Executive Director of Paradigm Initiative in Lagos, Nigeria. Would like to know what you think about AI regulation in Africa. Should it be controlled or allowed to grow? Share your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. And of course, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to Paul Ndiho on Substack, X, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, YouTube, and Spotify. Thanks for watching. See you around.